What up, y'all? This is Patrick Hayes. And in this video, I want to talk about social media addiction. And I also want to talk about its connection to our desire for community as human beings and how communication plays a large role in that. I feel like one of the things that's most important for us today in this day and age is to develop functional, harmonious community. And I feel like one of the primary keys for developing a functional and harmonious world community, or at least starting to move towards a functional world community, is our communication skills. And I feel like humanity as a whole right now, for various reasons, lacks the capacity to truly communicate in the kinds of ways that we need to communicate if we hope to transcend a lot of the issues that we're facing now in the world. So, a couple examples of how maybe we're lacking in that area is, well, one, oftentimes we don't even have the vocabulary to be able to express ourselves in the way that we need to express ourselves. This was something that I went through a lot as a child. I remember I had all these things going on, but I had no vocabulary to explain them. And so even if there was somebody that may have been available for me at that time, I wouldn't have even had the words and the vocabulary to explain what was happening. So in many ways, I feel like this is an issue for humanity at large. Like, a lot of us have not done the work to develop the language to be able to even express the things that we need to express in order to exhibit healthy relationships with the people around us. Beyond that, also, I think due to social conditioning, a lot of us are afraid to talk about the things that we really need to talk about because of the repercussions that we might feel from talking about them. And so a lot of you may resonate with that in the sense that, you probably grew up in environments where you were ultra sensitive and you were going through a lot of things, but you couldn't really talk about it with anybody in your environment because it just wasn't really available. And so even though you might have been in like a community, been surrounded with people, you could still feel extremely lonely. And I think as a result of this, loneliness is a major plague amongst humanity. It's interesting because we're so connected now via the internet, but loneliness is still the source of many, many addictions. And if you look at Gabor Mate's work, who is a revolutionary pioneer in the field of addiction. And addiction is something that I have a lot of experience with personally, but then also in studying through my path of recovery. Essentially, the general conclusion of his work is that addiction is caused by loneliness. And it definitely was in my case, so I spoke a little bit about how, I had a hard time connecting with people. But as a result, what I found was that the only way to connect with people and to feel okay in myself, due to this, I was starving to have connection from others. The only way to do it was there's two. It's like I had to do drugs and drink in order to feel safe enough to express myself, one. And two, I had to do drugs and drink in order to be able to manipulate my true expression into something that fit the mold of the environment that I found myself in. So this was very much my experience of how to cope with loneliness. And different people cope with it in different ways. I think this is why social media is one of the major addictions today, because social media actually it's like a substitute for actual community. And I'm not knocking it altogether. There's a lot of benefit that comes from social media, but it's not really set up for that kind of deep kind of communication that I was talking about that we really need in order to address the problems that we're going through, in order to really feel seen and connected and part of a true community. So Gabor Mate's work really talks about how this loneliness is the cause of addiction. And so when I look around at the world, people are addicted. They're addicted to all sorts of different things. They're addicted to distractions, addicted to media, addicted to social media, addicted to drugs and alcohol and prescription pills to basically cope with our loneliness. So where that leaves us is that everybody's lonely because they can't get true connection. And they can't get true connection because they can't even express it themselves. They don't have the faculties of being able to express what's going on with them, or they feel uncomfortable expressing the stuff that's really going on with them because there's not really an environment that receives them, with that expression, or both. And so then we have this social media thing going on where everybody is really addicted to social media because, they have this desire for connection, this desire to be seen. and they're not really getting it. So it becomes this like quantity over quality thing where people are trying to get more followers and more friends and become, celebrities online. And this is kind of like a coping mechanism for the deep loneliness that they're experiencing. It's like a perverted form of self-medication where I feel like what we really need is we need community with deeper communion, with deeper conversation, with deeper communication. And social media isn't cutting it because social media, the bit size in social media is just too small, and it's too flashy, and it's too distracting, and the attention span is too low. We have this capacity now with the internet to be so much more connected, but it's like the infrastructures for how social media has been set up doesn't really give us the capacity to go deep like that. In order to really have nuanced conversations that reveal the depth and the particularities of what we're going through and what we need to express, we really need to be speaking in person. We really need to be around other people that have the capacity to listen, that have the capacity to communicate, and that we can sit eye to eye, speak to each other, and go back and forth in a dialogue to clarify things as we move forward. It's so often that I see posts where somebody's saying something and then another person, disagrees with them, and then there's another disagreement. And as I'm looking at it, it's like I can tell it's actually, this is a semantics issue. It's not that they necessarily disagree on the points that they're talking about. It's that in the context of text, on a page, you can't really express what you're trying to express. It's something like 85% of communication is body language, 10% of it is vocal inflection, and 5% of it is the actual words that you're saying. And I don't know how accurate that actually is, but I know that there is some truth to that, and that a lot is missed when you're typing things in text, or when you're just putting a one-way video out where people can't say, wait, what do you mean by that? Or, give their opinion, to which then, the person speaking can be like, oh, wait, no, you misinterpreted it. This is how I actually meant it. And when we're actually in communication with people one-on-one, it opens up for so much more to be transferred back and forth. Our energetic fields are communicating with each other too. And the important thing here is that it's not like we need to connect with people that are all just like-minded. I think people tend to want to be around other people that can reinforce their personal identity by having the same beliefs as them. And that's kind of how they develop their sense of belonging to a community. And there's, less dissonance because there's less disagreements. But if we stick around people that only think the way that we think, then that's going to drive polarization, and it's going to drive separation amongst people. So what I think that we really need to look for is people that just, as long as they have the capacity to explain themselves and that they're willing to listen, then that's really the only requirement. And actually those conversations and those relationships might be the most beneficial that we can have, because it's going to help us to see things from different perspectives. And that might be a little scary to your sense of belongingness, like you want to belong in a particular community. And so it might feel like if you start reaching out and having conversations and having your beliefs shifted about certain topics because you're being introduced to more of a diverse topography, it might make you feel like you're distancing yourself from this identity that you have, and potentially even the sense of community that you felt being around other people with that same identity. But if we don't do this, then what's going to happen is that each worldview community is going to stay separate from other worldview communities, and they're not going to communicate. And then, you see this happening, Democrats and Republicans. It's like no one will speak to each other, and they just keep reinforcing their own belief systems. And since they're not willing to try to connect and they're not open to listen, it drives polarity, and then the conversation's already turned violent, and it, may get more physically violent. This is typically how violent breakouts happen have always happened in history. There's a polarization that's created, communication breaks down between the two sides, and then the conversation turns violent, and then it turns physically violent, and it's already turned violent. You can see it all over the news. You can see it all over media in general. Everyone's angry with each other, but no one's listening to each other. It's just, it's important for us to reach out to people that have different perspectives and start exploring a multidimensional perspective of this topography. So we're not locked into one worldview, but we can actually understand and resonate with many different worldviews. And I think that's really what it's going to take for us to truly unite. if we stick too strongly to our particular worldview and our idea and like think that it's the only right one and that eventually everyone else will conform to it because we're correct, I just think that's the wrong way of going about it. Even if it's a beautiful worldview. Essentially what I'm saying is that, we need to expand our communication, improve our communication. We need to come together as a community, and we need to embrace diversity. And we need to do this in person on a micro scale and hopefully create some sort of online platforms that enable us to speak in a more nuanced and in-depth kind of way so that we can truly communicate deeper substance. And through this kind of connection, I feel like a world community can arise. But it all starts with us connecting with people in our community in person and really starting to develop a multi-dimensional perspective. So this is Patrick Hayes. Like, subscribe, share with your friends. If you want to be notified next time that I'm releasing a video, hit the bell button and then you'll get a notification. And I'm super stoked to continue this journey and this conversation. And yeah, if you have any input or anything, go ahead and put it in the comments. I'd love to hear what you have to say about this. And I'm excited to talk to you next time. One love.